Hi, welcome to the Gamesplainer. I'm Jeff the Gamesplainer, and today I'm gamesplaining Aftershock. So Aftershock is a game that I've only recently managed to get my hands on. It came out right near the end of last year, beginning of this year. There's a little bit of question mark over the actual release date, but being in Australia, obviously it takes a while to get out here. So I've only just managed to get my hands on and get it played so I can do the video for you. This is one of those intriguing games that I've noticed I'm accidentally getting a lot, but not necessarily accidentally all the time, that have a minimum player count of 3. As someone who is playing 2-player quite often, I tend to try to make sure that it's a 2 to 4 player game, a 2 to 5, a 2 to 6, whatever the player count is. But in this case, it's a 3 to 5 player game. I have since got the expansion. I think that tells you I like the game. I enjoy the game. I find it nice and quirky. But here's the thing with this game. It takes a lot to understand all of the rules before you play the game. The problem is that it feels really bitsy when you're trying to explain it, because you do one thing and then you do something else and then you do something else that's going to move some stuff and then you can do something else. And all of these different things, they don't make 100% sense until you're actually playing it. So if you watch my videos, you'll notice that the Gamesplain is pretty much a playthrough of the first part of the game. So I did the Gamesplay as a continuation, as the second part of the game, because it uses the same rules and it's a little bit more interesting because there's already stuff on the board once you get to that second part of the game. I find that really frustrating. To be quite honest with you, I tried playing this the other night with some players. I had 4 at the table, and I kind of started explaining. I was like, you know what? This is vaguely what's going to happen, but we need to play it to understand it. So let's just get playing it. And I think that might be the case with this game. It might even be a matter of play the first round and then start fresh, so that everyone now understands what they're doing. If you have players who are concerned about that before they play, it's a real frustration with me with games that I need to play it to understand it. I need to be able to explain it so that we can play it. Once you play it, however, it's really straightforward. It's actually really understandable. You know exactly what's going on, and there's not a whole bunch of intricacy to the game. It's not a really heavyweight game, but the explanation, if you just look at how long it takes to actually explain what's happening, can be quite long. I appreciate this game. The art on the table is relatively stable with what has been coming out of Stronghold. There's nothing spectacular about it, but it's relatively straightforward with the other Stronghold games. I do like Stronghold. I've appreciated them, and if you look through my collection, you'll notice there's quite a lot of the Stronghold games. I see behind me straight away is Terraforming Mars. They're responsible for that. So they've got an understanding of how to play and how to manipulate games. And this is by Alan Moon, who is the designer of Ticket to Ride. And so you've kind of got this, there's a legacy in it that it's come from a designer who designed some really solid games, and games that are probably on your shelf that you don't even realize are by that designer. They're there and they play really fine, and there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing really expansive and difficult once you're playing it, but there's nothing wrong with it at the same time. I think this is probably around about a level 2-ish in terms of the difficulty rating, 1 to 5 scale, looking at the Board Game Geek ratings, which I just looked up, and yep, it comes in at a 2.33 at the moment, so it's on the relatively low 2s. Make of that what you will. If you think that there's value in those numbers, then great. If you don't, then that's fine too. But I think they're pretty stable. I totally agree with that difficulty rating level. I think this is a nice game to play. I don't know if it's a top 10 game, but it's a nice enough game to play. It's got some intricacy. It's got some real thinking on, and that's the whole thing. There is some real thinking, some real deep, heavy thinking once you actually get into the playing, because you've got 7 different spots on the board that you can put guys out on if you can get the right cards to be able to put those guys out. But then you've got the ability to manipulate where they're standing by putting bridges down and by having aftershocks in areas that will force people to leave that spot. And you can get your own guys to leave a spot. So if you've got a whole bunch and you're definitely winning that spot, you can make sure there's an aftershock there, causing your guys to travel somewhere else where you may not have any yet, but you will for the next lot of counting of how many people are in each area. The other really cool thing that I really like on this game is the way that it scores. When you get through to the scoring round, you have 4 markers that you're going to put on a board behind the screen so no one else can see what you're marking. You're saying, I want these 4 spots out of might be 7 or so spots, but these 4 different areas, I want them to be scored. Now, anything that only has 1 marker on it, once everyone reveals what they're wanting to score, isn't going to score. So 2 people will need to be saying, I want this one area to score in order for that area to score, which makes it really interesting because if you end up having a couple of islands that are just you and no one else, then it's very likely that those ones aren't going to get to score, even though they would get you some really good points. So there's a real tricky balance on, I want to get that, but I need to get that. Now, there are some cards that will allow you to put an extra marker down to say this area is scoring, and they're really worth going for if you find that you have some areas that are just you. It's worthwhile doing that because that's going to give you a heap of points without giving anyone else any points when that one scores. But it really is a matter of, if this person says yes to that one scoring and I say yes, then it's going to score. If only myself says yes to that and they don't, then I'm not going to score that one. And I've found that, especially at the end of the first round, if you don't have meeples out in 4 different areas, you'll put your markers on the spots where your meeples are, but then you've got these other ones, so you're kind of like, oh, okay, so if I put this here because no one's there, then no one will score and that's okay. But if I put it here, that person might get to score when they wouldn't necessarily anyway. There's a real push and pull on where to put the markers, and it can slow down the game a little bit because you kind of find yourself kind of going, okay, that one I'm going to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to get first on that. I'm going to get second on that one. This one, so and actually thinking through each of them, because there are quite a lot of spots. Each of the spots and weighing up what's the value of this one. Is it likely that someone else is going to try to get that particular spot scored as well? Is it not likely? And weighing all that up is a really, really important part of this game. There are some pieces in the game, little houses that I don't mention in the Gamesplanation. They are just worth 3 meeples, so there's a way to kind of save on having to put out all the meeples by putting one of them out if you have a lot of meeples in a location. So just be aware of that. That exists. There is also points for bridges. If you put out the most bridges, then you'll get points each time as well. But the bridges are relatively expensive kind of push-pull. It's not necessarily, I think it actually says in the rules, it's not necessarily a right way to play to just go after the maximum bridges out and that'll do. Because there's only going, I think there's 9 points per round for having the most bridges. And the most bridges might only be 3 pieces if other people only have 2 or 1 piece or even none. So there's definite push-pull on which way to go on that. Do I want to put these bridges out? What I found myself doing is going for the longer bridge spaces at the beginning of the game so that I can get a large number and get those points without having to really then worry about it so much for the future rounds, so I can focus on getting some other stuff in. That's the other thing. You only have so much money. You have 15 money to start with, and you're spending that money to get cards into your hand. So there's a price on each card, and you're paying the price for that card to be in your hand for you to be able to use that on this round. Now, you don't have to hang on to any money. So at the end of the round, because all the money that's gone to the bank will just get evenly split amongst the players. If you watch the games play, you'll notice that one of the players has 5 money at the end of the spending money time. And so if we were to go on to a third section of the game, third portion of the game, that player is actually starting with like 4 or 5 more money than everyone else at the table. And that can actually make a really big difference. But in the same breath, you don't necessarily want to hold back the money. because the more cards you can get, the more stuff you're going to be able to do with those cards. That once again, it's a real push-pull. You can see there's so much density on what we're doing with this game, on what's happening in this game, and what you can do within this game. It's the end product is just watch the game display, watch part of the game being played, and you'll get a feel for it straight away. You go, oh yeah, that feels really comfortable, I can do that. And that's kind of the essence of this game. It's actually a really comfortable game. It's easy to play once you know it. Look, I think that I've spoken well enough about this game. If you have any games that you would like to be gamesplained, please shoot me an email to thegamesplainer@gmail.com. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter @thegamesplainer to keep up to date with the games I'm playing. Subscribe to my videos to keep up to date with the games that I'm gamesplaining. And until next time, enjoy gaming.